This is the Tri-State Time Machine. Each week, your host, Vanessa Hankins, and her guests share memories and stories about the past, the present, and the future of the Tri-State area. That's West Virginia, Kentucky, and the Ohio areas. If you used to live here, or you currently live here, you're going to catch yourself saying out loud, "Wow, I remember that." Now, here's Vanessa.
Welcome back to the Tri-State Time Machine. I know, it's been a little while. Life has a funny way of filling every spare minute, and over the past several months, mine has certainly done that. Between my work here at the Keith Albee, family, and everything else that life has thrown my way, this little passion project, it had to take a back seat for a little bit, and I can't promise you it won't continue to happen. So thanks for sticking around and coming back. One thing I will say is that I've learned that history, it's not going anywhere. The stories are still here. The buildings are still standing. The places we pass every day are still quietly waiting for someone to ask, "How did this come to be? What's the story?" So today, we're picking up exactly where we left off. And I can't think of a better place to return than one of the places that thousands of us have visited our entire lives as locals. A place where we've taken prom pictures, where we've celebrated weddings, where we've taught our children to ride bikes, where we've walked through some of life's happiest, and for some of us, sometimes hardest moments. Today, we're talking about Ritter Park, but I have a feeling that by the end of this episode, you'll never walk through it quite the same way again. Every city has a place that feels like home. For New York, it's Central Park. For Savannah, it's Forsyth Park. For Charleston, it's White Point Garden. And for Huntington, it's Ritter Park. But here's the question. Why? Why here? Why not somewhere else? Why does Huntington have this beautiful park tucked away on the south side, while many other cities that are our size have never created anything like it? Today we're going to answer that question. But before we can appreciate Ritter Park, we have to imagine Huntington without it. If I asked you where Huntington's first park was, most people would probably answer Ritter Park. And technically, they'd be right. But that's only part of the history. Or part of the story, I guess. When Huntington was founded in 1871 by a railroad magnate, Collis P. Huntington, the city wasn't designed around green space. It was designed around commerce. Streets, rail yards, warehouses, factories, and homes. That all took priority. The original town plan did not include a public park. Picture Huntington around 1880. The railroad whistles echoed through the valley, factories lined the river, smoke drifted from chimneys, horse-drawn wagons crowded the muddy streets, coal dust settled on the buildings. The smell of industry was simply part of everyday life. It wasn't ugly to people then. It smelled like jobs. It smelled like progress. And Huntington was growing almost as unbelievably fast. Residents eventually began asking a simple question. Where can families go? Not to shop, not to work, not to church, just to enjoy themselves. As early as 1881, city leaders discussed creating a public park, and several attempts had failed. And then came Four-Pole Creek. Today it feels peaceful. But in the early 1900s, this wasn't Huntington's showpiece. It was the edge of town. Then came one of the biggest what-if moments in Huntington history. In 1908, the city purchased roughly 55 acres along Four-Pole Creek, not for recreation, but as the future site of a municipal garbage incinerator. Imagine that. So instead of roses, smoke. Instead of wedding photos, ash. Instead of children riding bicycles, garbage wagons. The Huntington we know today almost never existed. But history has a funny way of changing because one of the determined people involved, one of the most determined, actually two people, and that's where our story really begins. Every great city has at least one person who looked around and simply said, "We can do better." For Huntington, that man was Rufus Switzer. Most people recognize the name. Very few know of the man. Born in Cabell County in 1855, before Huntington even existed, Switzer watched his region transform from farms into one of America's fastest growing industrial cities. He began his career as a school teacher before becoming an attorney and eventually one of Huntington's most respected civic leaders. By the early 1900s, Huntington had a garbage problem. City officials believed an incinerator was the modern solution, but Switzer disagreed. He looked at the same land everyone else saw and imagined something entirely different. A public park. Many believed the land was far too outside the city. Today that seems unbelievable, but back then it wasn't considered the outskirts. Switzer believed that Huntington would grow to the park. He even reportedly offered to buy the land himself for the same price that the city had paid if that was what it was going to take to save it. Eventually, he became the mayor, and one of his priorities was creating Huntington's first true public park. He hired landscape architect J.T. Withers to prepare a master plan. Unfortunately, as what seems to happen often, politics intervened. Switzer lost the re-election before the plan could be realized, but his vision survived. His greatest accomplishment wasn't building a park. It was convincing the entire city that it deserved one. Of course, even visionaries need allies, and Rufus Switzer found one in Lober Baron, whose name would eventually become synonymous with the park itself. Charles Lloyd Ritter. History has a funny way of creating heroes. Sometimes they're driven by generosity, sometimes by self-interest. Sometimes it's impossible to separate the two. Charles Lloyd Ritter was one of the Huntington's wealthiest businessmen. Born in Pennsylvania after the Civil War, he built his fortune in the timber industry before relocating his business interests to Huntington. He chose Huntington because of its railroads, the Ohio River, and its growing importance as an industrial hub. As his success grew, Ritter built an impressive home on the hillside overlooking the southern edge of the city. From there, he could see the property that the city intended to use for a garbage incinerator. Imagine spending your life's fortune building a beautiful estate, only to learn smokestacks and burning refuse would soon dominate the view. Whether his motivation was protecting the property values, civic pride, or both, Ritter approached city leaders with an offer that changed Huntington forever. If the city abandoned the incinerator plan and instead created a public park, he would donate approximately 20 additional acres adjoining the property. His only request was that the roadway provide access towards his estate, and the city accepted. That decision permanently changed Huntington. And ironically, while Rufus Switzer supplied the vision, the park eventually became known by Ritter's name. The surrounding neighborhood flourished as a predominant Huntington families continued to build homes around the new green space. By 1913, the land had been secured. The dream had become reality. Or had it? Because Ritter Park, that opened in 1913, looked almost nothing like the park that we know today. September 11th, 1913, after years of debate, Huntington officially opened Ritter Park. The celebration included the extension of the streetcar line so residents could get throughout the city could travel directly to the new park. Imagine boarding a trolley with hundreds of your neighbors, not to attend a ball game or a parade, but to celebrate the opening of a public park. Yet visitors expecting today's Ritter Park would have been surprised. No rose garden, no iconic stone bridges, no amphitheater, where our folks at Heart like to perform. No fountain, no limestone walking paths. The park was largely just open fields, trees, Four-Pole Creek, and possibility. Mayor Rufus Switzer had hired landscape architect J.T. Withers to prepare a master plan worthy of Huntington's first great public park. Before the plan could be realized, politics had intervened like we talked about earlier, and Switzer left office and the master plan was abandoned. So for years, development slowed. If Rufus dreamed Ritter Park and Charles Ritter helped save it, there's one more man whose name deserves to be remembered. Because when you picture Ritter Park today, you're really picturing his work. Have you ever noticed that nothing in Ritter Park feels accidental? The creek seems to bend naturally. The bridges invite you to slow down. The roads gently curve instead of running straight. The trees, they frame the landscape. That wasn't luck. That was design. The man responsible for the landscape architect was Gus Wofford. Unlike Switzer and Ritter, Wofford wasn't a politician or a businessman. He was a landscape architect who believed parks should shape how people experience a place. When he began working with Huntington's Park Commission in the late 1920s, Ritter Park existed for years, but still lacked the defining features that people associate with it today. And then came the Great Depression. While the nation struggled economically, New Deal programs like the Works Progress Administration put skilled craftsmen back to work, building public projects. So Ritter Park, luckily, became one of those projects. The WPA did not create Ritter Park. It transformed it. Every stone bridge, every retaining wall, every staircase, every carefully fitted block of native stone required human hands. Imagine standing beside Four-Pole Creek in the 1930s. No excavators, no hydraulic equipment, only masons with chisels, hammers, levels, and determination. Each stone was selected, trimmed, lifted, placed, adjusted, one by one. Nearly a century later, those same structures still carried thousands of visitors every year. That's a remarkable amount of craftsmanship if you really think about it. Wofford also embraced Four-Pole Creek rather than hiding it. Instead of treating the creek like an obstacle, he designed the park around it. The bridges became destinations instead of simple crossings. The roads curved to reveal the new views. The landscape unfolded slowly, encouraging visitors to wander rather than rush. Perhaps my favorite thought is this. Many of the towering trees providing shade today were planted by people who knew they would never enjoy them at full maturity. They planted them anyways. That is one of the greatest acts of optimism imaginable. By the end of the 1930s, Ritter Park had finally become the park Huntington's early leaders envisioned. Not simply a public space, a civic masterpiece. If Ritter Park has a heart, it beats inside the rose garden. That's where our story goes next. Close your eyes for a second. Picture Ritter Park. I bet almost everyone listening pictured the same place. Not the playground, not the tennis courts, not Four-Pole Creek. You pictured the rose garden. Weddings, prom pictures, family photos, graduation photos, maybe someone you love. Thousands of roses have quietly become the backdrop of thousands of lives. The rose garden was not part of the original 1913 park. For more than 20 years, the hillside where it is now sits empty and simply was just another beautiful slope overlooking the Four-Pole Creek. During the 1930s, landscape architect Gus Wofford, as we discussed earlier, designed the terrace garden that would become one of the most recognizable places in Huntington. But why roses? During the early 20th century, roses symbolized beauty, prosperity, and civic pride. Cities across America created elaborate rose gardens to show that they were more than factories and railroads, and Huntington wanted to do the same. The garden unfolds 4 terraced levels connected by a stone stairway and a retaining wall. You never see the entire garden at once, and honestly, I've never thought of that before. But you discover it one level at a time, and that was intentional. Over the decades, thousands of rose bushes representing hundreds of varieties have filled these terraces. The garden eventually gained national recognition, and experts from the American Rose Society praised both its design and its beauty. One name deserves special recognition: Truman Watts. Beginning in 1989, Watts dedicated himself to restoring and maintaining the rose garden. Under his care, it became one of the finest municipal rose gardens in the region. Most visitors only see the blooms. They never see the pruning, the soil preparation, the winter protection. None of that. So thankfully, he had a vision and the work ethic to restore that and make it happen. If you've made it this far with me, I want to promise you something. The next time that you're in Ritter Park, slow down. Because once you know its stories, you'll start to see things that you never noticed before. Let's start with something hiding in plain sight. Lake Kapuskonwee, and I don't think that I'm saying that right. I'm probably butchering it, and I'm sorry if I am. But anyways, it's an artificial lake once occupied part of today's park near the playground area. But after a tragic drowning of a child, the lake was drained and eventually disappeared from the landscape. Today, children laugh and play where that forgotten lake once shimmered. Not far away were the stone-lined lily pods. They weren't accidents of nature. They were intentionally designed to work with the natural contours of the hillside, allowing water to move gently through the landscape. And then, we talked about that amphitheater earlier. Tucked naturally into the hillside, it almost disappears until you're standing inside it. That, too, was intentional. Rather than forcing the landscape to fit the design embraced the landscape. Near McCoy Road stands one of the park's most overlooked treasures, the DAR Cabin. Its history stretches back long before Ritter Park existed, with ties to an earlier farmstead and even use during a flu epidemic before being restructured by the Daughters of the American Revolution. Look up into the trees. Some have watched over this park for generations. They witnessed the Great Depression, World War II, the 1937 flood, countless weddings, thousands of family photos, millions of footsteps. Those trees have watched Huntington grow up. The neighborhood surrounding Ritter Park also tells a story. Beautiful homes in colonial revival, Tudor revival, craftsman, and prairie styles sprang up because of the park itself. In 2012, Ritter Park received a national recognition when the American Planning Association named it one of America's great public spaces. Not because it was the biggest, not because it was the most expensive, but because generation after generation has continued choosing it as the place where life happened. So the next time you're walking through Ritter Park, pause on one of those stone bridges. Listen to Four Pole Creek. Look up into the branches planted by people who knew they would never enjoy their full shade. Walk through the rose garden. Stand where the lake once existed. Remember the vision of Rufus. Remember the generosity of Mr. Ritter. Remember the craftsmanship of Gus and the WPA workers. None of this had to exist. This place could have been smokestacks. It could have been garbage wagons. It could have been that incinerator. But instead, it became Huntington's gathering place, a place where childhood memories became wedding photographs, morning walks became lifelong routines, and one generation quietly hands the park off to the next. This has been Tri-State Time Machine. I'm Vanessa Hankins. Until next time, keep looking closer, because history is almost always hiding in plain sight.
Thanks for listening to the Tri-State Time Machine. If you have a memory you want Vanessa to talk more about, just send her an email at tstm@mail.com or post a comment on the Tri-State Time Machine Facebook page. Did you like the episode? Be sure to share it with friends and family. It's the only way we can continue this fun work that we do. You can find a link in the show notes that you can use to share it.